Welcome. I'm Bruce Delmonico, Assistant Dean for Admissions here at the Yale School of Management. Sorry for the delay, entirely my fault. My Zoom ignorance, even after 2+ years, has caught up to me, and so I had a tough time getting into the room. But I appreciate your patience. It's good to see everybody on today's session. We have a great session today. We have some current students we're going to talk about. So the Yale SOM Experience, and this is really, it's not meant to be about admissions, even though I'm leading it. It's really meant to be just information about what it's like to be a student at Yale SOM. And got some great panelists here for you today to share their time here at Yale SOM. And I'm speaking fast to try and catch up a little bit. I'll try and slow down, but just to give a sense of what their life is like and what things are like being a student here at Yale. So feel free to, I have some questions that I'll ask, just some pre-submitted questions, but definitely we want to be able to answer as many questions as we can of yours. We're starting a little late. We're supposed to end at 12:50 U.S. Eastern Time. If it's possible, I know you all, I think you're all probably on internships or have things going on. So if you're able to stay till 1, that's great. If not, then we'll end at 12:50 as we had planned. But hopefully we can make up a little bit of time if possible. But what I was going to say is we have some pre-submitted questions, but definitely if you have questions, please submit them in the chat. We'll try to get to as many of your questions as possible. My colleague Diana Sellers, who's on this as the SOM admissions thumbnail, will try to answer as many in the chat box as well. So we will. But just to kick things off, I'd love it if everybody could just go around, maybe just do a quick introduction. And as I see you all on my screen, I have Carlos on my upper left. So would you be willing to start with the introductions?
Sure, thanks, Bruce. Nice to see you all here. Carlos Mancera, graduated in class of 2019. What you should know about my experience? Well, my daughter was born in Yale, New Haven. And right after my MBA, I came back to Mexico City to work for BCG. That's it.
Great. I don't know, Claire, if you're able to go next.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Claire Lee from the class of 2017. At Yale, I was on student government, where I led student life for a couple of years and really enjoyed that experience. And obviously I'm biased, but the best 2 years of my life were spent in New Haven, Connecticut. Currently in Santa Monica or Los Angeles, California, and I work for Disney, where I'm the chief of staff to our chairman for the international content and operations business. And I wear 2 hats now, so I also lead content strategy for our local productions abroad. Nice to meet all of you.
That's good. Thank you so much, Claire. And actually, by coincidence, I was just returned from a week in Paris and spent 2 days at Disneyland Paris, which was fantastic.
Oh, that's
so one of your many international properties.
Yes.
So it's great. It was great to be there. Great to be back. And thank you so much for joining. And Hallie, if you're able to go next.
Hi everyone, I'm Hallie Whitman. I just finished my first year in the dual degree MBA MPH. And this summer I'm in New York, where I'm from, interning in healthcare consulting. So good to be with you all today.
Great. Thanks so much, Hallie. And Alan, if you're willing to bring it on home.
Absolutely. So I'm Alan Takasugi. I'm class of 2023 with Hallie, not a dual degree. But for the summer, I'm interning at Centerview Partners, doing investment banking in Palo Alto. So really enjoying that so far.
Thank you so much, Alan. It's great to have you all. It's great to have a nice mix of some current students, rising second years, and alumni to share your perspectives. And I guess just to start off, kick things off, I won't have everybody answer every question because we want to try to get to as many questions as possible. Maybe for the first question, if you're all would be able to answer just kind of what drew you to Yale SOM. Obviously, there are lots of different sort of options out there for the MBA degree. And what was it about Yale SOM that caught your attention? Maybe we can go in reverse order so we don't just keep replicating. Maybe Alan, you might, if you'd be willing to go first.
Sure. So I think on the career side, which is kind of where I started with my MBA search and narrowing my school choices, I was kind of between consulting and banking. And SOM does have pretty strong offerings in both. And obviously I ended up in one of those two. So it's turned out pretty well so far. Yeah, and I think more on the community side, one thing that really drew me to New Haven was that, people don't really have pre-existing networks in New Haven. I was coming in from DC, and I think, had we been in New York, a lot of people at New York schools that I know are, going out every weekend, but not necessarily with their business school friends. So, being in New Haven, people are really staying on campus a lot of weekends. And it's a great way to build a much tighter community, I think.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I don't know, Hallie, would you be willing to go next?
Yeah, so definitely echo Alan's sentiments about being in New Haven and just the small class size that SOM offers. I think it builds a really nice community feel where you kind of are able to get to know lots of people across the class, but also always meeting new people. For me, my admissions process was a little bit different since I was looking at dual degrees, so wanted to find somewhere that was really integrated across both the healthcare and business components. But I think that what drew me to Yale also in that regard was just the integration across the whole university that SOM offers. So there is a real focus on letting you take advantage of offerings across all of Yale's network. So that was another factor that I looked for and found at Yale.
That's great. Thank you so much. Claire, sorry, you're already unmuted. I kind of.
No, it's all good. Trying to help you speed things up. Yeah, I mean, everything that has been said so far, I completely agree with. I had kind of a reverse trajectory where I was coming from consulting, and the firm that I was working for at the time had a very formalized process where they send a number of us off to go to business schools. And if we come back, there is a return offer. So as a virtue of that process, there was a very robust, I think, introduction to many of the top schools that many of you are likely considering applying for. But what really stood out to me about Yale was, of course, the mission. I thought it was the most authentic, and the fact that it was founded based on that mission of serving both business and society was really, truly unique to me, and not something that was necessarily fashionable or trendy at the time, which it was back when I was applying. And I think really that authenticity radiated even in the walls of Evans to everyone I spoke to in terms of the student body and the curriculum and the faculty, et cetera. And I think the other thing that actually I live on a day-to-day basis now is the international aspect. I really wanted to be challenged and meet people from all walks of life that I would never get to experience that otherwise. And I did find that at Yale in that diversity and that representation, not just in the countries that they come from or the languages that they speak, but just the perspectives and the lived experiences that they had. So I think those two things really drew me to applying to the school.
Thank you so much. And Carlos?
I would simply add that I was looking for exposure to other topics like environmental studies on top of my business education, and that's something that really drew me into Yale. I was originally looking at a dual degree. I ended up not taking it. But even so, I took classes at the School of Forestry, as it was called back then, which were great. And the second thing that drew me to Yale SOM was an early exposure to the alumni network here in Mexico, which was very welcoming, and we still remain quite close. So both things have exceeded my original expectations.
That's great. Thank you all for those insights and those perspectives. And I want to follow up. I know you touched on a number of different things, and I would love to try and get to as many of them as possible. I know, Alan, you had talked a bit about, and I think Hallie maybe touched on this as well, particularly the community. And I know that is one, and Claire a little bit with the mission as well, kind of touched on that as well. But I know that that's an important component of the experience at any business school, but certainly at Yale SOM. And I'd love to, and again, I don't want to ask, don't need everybody to answer. I want to make sure we get to as many questions as possible, so I don't feel like you have to. But if you do have something to add, please feel free to share. But if there are ways, any thoughts about how you would describe the community, and also if there are any particular anecdotes or any examples of how that community kind of played out, how you lived that as an SOM student.
Well, I can get it started.
I was gonna say, I'm gonna move past the cold calling. I'll just let you jump in as appropriate.
No, and I'm sure that's the fun part of the experience at student at SOM, is that many people will walk the same halls but have very different experiences coming out of that experience. So I think it's important that we get many voices as possible. But one thing I will say, it's really hard to pick just one, which is always a good problem to have. So my first year I think the internship fund is a really good example of not just of us kind of living and breathing our mission and practicing that, but it's also very unique in that it's an empowerment opportunity for first-year students, which traditionally a lot of the student-led activities are led by second-year students on campus. So I think just so that everybody knows very quickly, Internship Fund is a student-driven initiative that collects money and sponsorship for other students in their class that may be pursuing social impact or other impact-led activities and internships that just simply do not support the cost of living in a lot of the cities that these are found in. And so as a part of that, I did student fundraising, which was just completely a personal challenge for me, but I think it allowed me to just forge relationships and friendships and simply talk to people that I wouldn't have, especially when that is happening. A lot of that relationships and social networking is with your cohort. So I think that's one example. And I think the second example that I think a lot of people don't fully appreciate until they're out of it is how much power and empowerment that students have to really drive and create their own adventure and journeys on campus. And so one thing that I'm really proud of is in our year, we started SOM Serves, which is a community-led volunteering and skills-based giving back type of program that's a week long, and it was led and started by student government. And we kind of partnered with the broader SOM and New Haven community, and not just for the students, but for every stakeholder in the broader Yale ecosystem to come together and give back. And I thought it was kind of crazy that we didn't necessarily have that before, given our mission and given how passionate the students and others are about giving back to the community. So that's another example of something that was completely student started and executed in that same year. And so the world is really your oyster when you come to SOM. And if there's a need and an opportunity, or you just want to have fun and create something new, I think there's all the support behind you to make that happen, which is a really unique learning experience.
If I may jump in, I think the community benefits a lot from being in New Haven, because New Haven being a small city allows for a lot of things to happen together. So speaking on my own experience, I mean, there wasn't a day where I wouldn't hang out with friends or people from the wider Yale community, professors, staff, people from all over. So I think that was great. It's a very warm community. And the second thing, and this is a personal anecdote, when my daughter was born, my wife and I were like, we didn't know what to do, and many times we had literally no hands or time to do our own things and take care of our daughter. And there were a couple of friends of ours who literally took our daughter to class at Yale SOM, and everyone was absolutely okay about it. Professors were very supportive. Fellow students were also happy to have a kid on the classroom. I don't know if everyone was happy, but I think she behaved while she was there during class. But yeah, I think that's a fantastic example to show you how supportive the community can be when you were in need of help.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Claire and Carlos, for those examples and those perspectives. I'd love to, and you obviously have the additional insight of sort of being alumni and kind of having sort of gone all the way through. Actually, a question for Hallie and Alan, as current students, and it's a little more career oriented in terms of where you see yourself after graduating from Yale SOM, and what kind of impact do you want to make on society, given the mission of the school?
Yeah, I can jump in. That's a really big question, I think. And obviously, as business school students, the fact that we are challenged every day in the MBA program to think about that is something I don't think I would get just anywhere. So yeah, I think as somebody in business, I think is really important to be able to think about issues, especially externalities like environmental impact, social injustice, and think about your work day to day in that frame. I think that's something I've learned a lot about. You know, we have a class in the fall in the core called State and Society, where we do talk about a lot about how business kind of interacts with society, society interacts with business. And I think, you know, that extra dimension hopefully will help us become more responsible leaders in the future.
Yeah, I would agree with Alan's points there. I found State and Society to be one of the best classes in the core, in my opinion. And I think just taking that framing of how can we, as future leaders in business with influence, be able to take that frame on everything that we do, you know, regardless of field, industry, agnostic to all of that, just thinking about how to be good people and interact with people we work with, people around us, and just I think that ethos that really resonates throughout the SOM experience is something that you know, I hope and plan to take with me well beyond the 2 years.
That's great. Thank you both for those responses. And it's a big question. It's a big issue, obviously, in thinking about kind of how you want to translate your vision of yourself or for yourself into your professional life is it's a challenge. And actually would love to sort of, there was a question that came in that kind of picks up on that and asked specifically maybe more on a practical sense of how do you think you benefited from the career development office and how that process worked, maybe just a little more generally, you know, how you were able to plug into, or maybe other resources you were able to take advantage of. I know people often use sort of alumni or faculty or kind of peers. So just a little bit more of a sense of how that's unfolded for you all as you've gone through either both sort of Carlos and Claire, and you're having already gone through it, or Hallie and Alan already still in the process of going through that.
Yeah, happy to kick off on this one. I found CDO, or the Career Development Office, to be very helpful in my recruitment process this year. So they started programming with us over the summer before you even start your MBA. So having that prep time beforehand to get your resume up to date and your cover letter and all of that, I found to be really helpful in just getting myself ready to start the MBA. And then once you get to campus in the fall, there's a lot of targeted programming early on in September to kind of, again, work on that networking and get your story developed and all of that. Also, the professional clubs are great resources outside of CDO. So there's consulting club, finance club, et cetera. And they do their own curriculum, which is also really helpful in the recruiting process. The other thing I found to be extremely helpful was the second year career advisors. So that's a program that CDO runs where they work with second year students who have already gone through the recruitment process to match you up with first and second years and have that as a resource who can really answer specific questions in your industry about what to expect in interviews and things like that. So all of those resources taken together, I felt very prepared, and I felt like there was a lot of support through both the school and through those more informal student-run networks for recruitment.
My experience was a bit different because I didn't recruit for the US. I was always aiming to come back to Mexico. Mm-hmm. And I think the most helpful resource was the alumni network, who, again, were always very responsive and supportive on whatever it was that I needed. I'd say that also, like, my biggest advice to anyone who's planning on doing an MBA would be to be very clear on what you want to get out of your MBA, because once you get into it, you'll see that there are so many options and so many things that you simply cannot do them all. So the more clear you are on what you want to get out of it will help you spend the most time in the things that will help you towards that goal. And in case you're planning on, going back to my first point, in case you're planning on recruiting internationally, please do not underestimate the power of the alumni network. You'll be surprised.
Thanks so much, Carlos and Hallie. I know you touched on that a little bit as well. And actually was another question that came in was about the alumni network, and how did you find the Yale SOM Alumni Network? And Carlos and Hallie as well, you both touched on that. I don't know if there are any other thoughts about the alumni network or kind of your experiences with the SOM or even larger Yale alumni networks.
Yeah, I think speaking as an alumni, maybe I'll flip the question. I've spoken to a number of students over the past few years that are interested in working in media and entertainment. And I think Yale has done a phenomenal job of connecting me with those that are serious and interested about, coming out to LA and working out here. And it's great. And I'm a few years down the line now at this point where I'm actually hiring for people. And it's really great to have this untapped resource of students that are coming out that I know are personally, very much invested in the mission that we all share. And that, they know how to work with international stakeholders. They, likely are internationals themselves many times. And, and it's a really nice way to kind of be able to give back to the community in a way that's also helpful to them. And also like, I also can benefit from that by hiring really great people from Yale. So I'm very much living it. And I would say that it's definitely helped me as well in the hiring process.
That's great. I like the way, excuse me, I like the way you did flip that, because I'm thinking about you as the sort of the consumer of the alumni network, but obviously you and Carlos especially are actually alumni members yourselves, and sort of the value to you of being sort of in that position. Shifting gears a little bit, another question that came in has to do with the ways in which, as students at SOM, you benefited from Yale University as a whole, both academically and professionally. And I don't know if there are ways, examples you could give about ways in which you tapped into the larger university kind of environment ecosystem, and what that looked like.
I can share a story here. So I did most of my courses at Yale SOM and the School of Forestry, but my wife benefited a lot from Yale. So as a partner of the student, you can take classes pretty much anywhere at Yale. So she's a psychologist by training, and so she took a couple of classes there, which she absolutely enjoyed. And after a couple of months, she ended up talking to someone who worked at the Child Study Center at Yale, who was looking for people to help him in a research project he was doing for new medicine. And she ended up hiring my wife, got her a work visa to work for Yale University. So I think that's an example, a pretty good example to show you how potent the whole Yale environment can be, not only for students, but for people who live with students or who share their lives with students.
That's a great example. Thank you so much. I don't know if there are any other examples about sort of the connections to the larger university, or ways in which you've been able to leverage the larger university, either during your time at Yale or beyond.
Yeah, I can jump in real quick. I think as a rising second year, obviously we've been taking largely core courses for our first year, so have not had as much of a chance yet to explore some of the broader class selection at Yale. That said, I have been already kind of like snooping out classes I want to take across the university, and you can literally take a Yale Law School class or a class in the School of, I think it's called the David Geffen School of Drama now, but essentially like the School of Theater on like storytelling. There's a class that looked really good to me. So I think just in terms of course selection, this is something, that was really differentiating for me as well, is that I'm not limited to taking just business classes. I could literally take all, classes outside of SOM theoretically, I think, in my second year and be just fine. So.
No, that's great. That's a great example, and I think that's definitely something that students very much look forward to once you get into the electives. And actually, start backtracking academically. I did have the question come in about the core class, about the perspectives-based classes, and specifically, I'm just going to read it off. It's when you interact with people from other business schools, how do you think this perspective-based learning helped you compare to traditional MBA courses? I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, and if so, feel free to share.
I can share a quick anecdote about this. Having just started my internship working with students from other MBA programs from across the country, we were talking about our curriculum structures, and I was explaining kind of the perspectives, lenses that SOM uses for academics. And then we had a session during our onboarding about like leadership qualities and integrating empathy and different perspectives. And he said to me, "Oh, wow, you must be so well prepared for this because of your perspective lens and how you learn about multiple stakeholders' perspectives. That's part of your core." So I just thought that really embodied what I loved about the core, and how I like that, how that structure really allows for sort of learning all of what you would learn in a traditional business school setup, but also integrating across perspectives and learning how to think more broadly, how those different voices are integrated in business settings. So I just thought that was a nice sort of recognition of that aspect of SOM that I think is really special.
That was a great example, great anecdote. And I appreciate that. And I don't know if there are any other thoughts or insights about sort of the perspectives courses. There doesn't need to be, but I just want to make sure I'm not leaving any.
I mean, I was going to say, I think being a chief of staff, I think one of the best things is you get exposure to executives, the C-suite and their decision making. And I will say that this is so unique because once you're making, monumental decisions at that level, rarely do you do it with mechanical skill sets and tools. Like there's analysis for sure. And, but it's really this stakeholder or lens-led viewing that really allows you to consider and evaluate and ponder and deliberate these decisions because they're very complex. And so this is something I learned to appreciate much later on after I left SOM, but I will say that this is the most realistic, I think, in preparing you as future executives and leaders to consider many different stakeholders because we do it every day in the actual jobs and in the support function that I provide for my boss, right? And I think it's so unique and very much appreciated as an alumni as well.
That's great. Thank you so much, Claire. I really appreciate that. I'd love to maybe not pick on you too much, Hallie, but I did get a question specifically for you about the joint degree program, and I know that there are probably a number of people listening who are thinking about a joint degree, and the question was, how did SOM provide support in managing both curricula? And I don't know. I know that you can only be a student at one school at a time, so it's not you're technically at each school sequentially. But I don't know how the schools helped you manage that, or if that was more of a on you to do. So I'd love to, I guess, get any insights about that you're willing to provide.
Yeah, sure, happy to. So I think even though you're technically only enrolled at one school at a time per semester, you still kind of integrate, at least, and this is specific to my experience in my MPH program, that might be some variance across joint degrees. But yeah, so there is integration in that I took both MBA and MPH classes. The first year was largely MBA focused, so I was spending much more time at SOM than I was in my other school. But in the second year, when we're able to start taking electives, it will be more mixed. I will say being between two schools does have its challenges. I do have less flexibility to take electives outside of those two schools, like Alan was mentioning. And yeah, and I do think it is largely self-managed, but we have advisors specific to the dual degree program that help with academic planning and time management and things like that. So there are resources. And in my program as well, there's 5 other students doing the version of the degree that I am. So we lean on each other a lot, as well as the second year students who are a year ahead of us in the program to kind of talk through scheduling, think through planning and all of that kind of thing. So there's lots of resources and support, although it can be challenging at times to balance between the two.
Those are very helpful insights. Thank you very much, Hallie. Want to shift gears a little bit. And I think a number of you touched on this, but I did get a question specifically about extracurricular activities and asking what you were engaged in as a student at Yale. And also maybe more broadly, this is not extracurricular specific, but what is social life like at SOM? So maybe kind of a two-pronged, if anyone's willing to tackle both the extracurricular piece, the activity piece, and also just the social life more generally.
Okay, well, I can start.
No one wants to touch it. That's a very
well, I think the current students just probably speak on it, since I'm sure what we did almost 7 years ago is definitely not cool anymore. But I will say that I had so much fun at SOM. Like, again, the best 2 years of my life, and I think that was just what Carlos talked about, just like the coming together of people that are like-minded and amazing and from so different from you, all different walks of life, and just getting to hang out all the time in New Haven is so special. But I think as I did student government, as I mentioned, I did student life. And so I kind of had the opportunity to see that, get that bird's eye view of a lot of the different clubs and activities that were going on at SOM. And it's just so different. It's very much a create your own adventure. But my favorite memories are, Killington, where there's a ski and snowboard club organizes a ski trip every year out to Killington, Vermont, which is really fun. So that's kind of a weekend. You basically lift and shift, Evans into the mountains of Vermont, which is amazing. All the way to doing, I did my international exploration in Indonesia. And so post trip, we all went to Bali together and had a ball. I mean, it's, there's just, and again, like, I'm sure if you ask all four of us would give you very, very different experiences on like how we spent our weekends and had fun. But I will say that I recently got married, and so many of my, I made my best friends at SOM, and we still are on many group chains. Like, we live all over the country now, but so many of them came to my wedding, and it's, you really do make friends for life. And so I think that was the other very special experience. And I'm so grateful for that. And I really don't think I would have found that anywhere else.
I fully agree with everything Claire said.
That's great. No, that was a great response, and congratulations on your wedding. That's fantastic. I actually got a really interesting question come in for Alan, because you had mentioned that you were interested in either consulting or investment banking. And the question was, did Yale SOM influence your decision to go into investment banking, or did you have previous experience? I can't remember how much of the background you gave, but how did that process play out? Because those are, two different paths. And how, if at all, did Yale kind of inform that decision?
Yeah, so I actually was working in media before coming to SOM at National Geographic, and came out knowing that I wanted to do something a little bit more strategic. So I think that's kind of how I figured out that I wanted to do either banking or consulting. I think once I got there, speaking to second years who are really available and always happy to grab coffee, no matter like what time of year it is, how busy they are, to just help you think through things. That was kind of step one, and that was really helpful, just getting some ideas from people who had either already worked in those areas or who had interned over their summer. And then I think going a little bit further, I think talking to the CDO was also really helpful in just, as a sounding board, figuring out, how many firms should I be applying to? What should I be thinking about in terms of what I want? And how should I start framing this question and like actually digging in and figuring out process-wise what I need to do to get from point A to point B. So I think both of those resources were really helpful. And ultimately, did end up choosing banking, but I think just as easily could have ended up in consulting.
Yep, no, that's great. Thank you so much, Alan. I'm gonna take a couple questions myself, because a couple came in that I think are maybe I can just kind of knock out quickly. One of them had to do with how many electives you can take outside of SOM, because we did talk about sort of taking courses elsewhere at the university. And it's actually, I don't know if this was expressly said, but actually there is no limit. You can take as many as you'd like. So you start to take, we talked about, start to take electives in the spring of your first year, and your second year is entirely electives. You could theoretically take all of those outside of SOM if you wanted, and those would all count towards your graduation. Which I think is a nice thing. I know at other schools you can take a certain number, but at SOM there actually is no limit to the number of courses you could take outside of the school. And then a second question that touches on the joint degree was kind of for Hallie or me, and I'm happy to take it, which is about someone wanting to pursue an MBA, PhD, and you have to do the MBA first or the PhD first, or can you do either? And you can actually, you can technically do either if you're going to do a joint degree. Most people, or should say a good number of people, apply to both programs from the outset, and then you work out your course of study after, if you're assuming you're admitted to both. And there are some that are, the MPH, MBA, I think you start at MPH. There are other programs that typically start with us. But there are some that have flexibility, but it's also possible if you get into one of the two programs but not the other, you can apply in your first year and then do the joint degree, and that's not an uncommon approach either. And some people actually apply to both, only get into one and then apply to the second school again in your first year. So it's there are different ways to approach it, but you can make it work in either direction. starting at either the PhD program or the MBA program. I think for the PhD specifically, we get few, and I think inherently, invariably are already at the PhD program, frankly, for that particular degree. But there are lots of other graduate degrees where students from, for example, the environment school apply to SOM from the environment school, or students who are at SOM apply to law school from SOM. So it can go in both directions if it's not from the outset initially. Let me see. Here's a question that's getting back to, and I think there are other questions about this as well, back to the career side. And does a SOM support career changers? In this particular case, pivoting from business management to healthcare, business management in healthcare to finance. But I know obviously I can start by saying I think about 2/3 of our students end up doing some sort of pivot, whether it's industry or role or both. And so it's not an uncommon thing, but I don't know if any of you have examples or kind of thoughts about the process of doing a career change at SOM and using SOM as the pivot.
I'll just add that I think that your fellow students are some of the best resources for that. A lot of them have worked in roles or industries that you might be interested in, even within the first year class as well as the second years. So just really taking advantage of that network as well as the alumni has been really helpful in thinking about what different roles actually look like. So yeah, very, very common to do career role switching, and there's lots of resources available for that.
Great, thank you so much, Hallie. I know we're right at 12:50, which was the original end point, but I know thanks to me, we did start late. I don't know. I just want to get a quick. Are y'all able to stick around for a few more minutes? I know you've got stuff going on. You only allotted to the 12:50, so but let me know if you do have a few more minutes for a couple more questions. I see some nodding, so that sounds great. So we'll go maybe just a little bit more. And I appreciate everybody else on the panel, or sorry, on the session, sticking around as much as possible as well. So one question that came in, actually, it's a kind of a fun one, is would love to hear a couple of the panelists describe the best day they can remember having had at Yale. Any events, accomplishments, classes that made that the best or most memorable day. And so it sounds like a sort of fun question to ask. So any thoughts any of you have are certainly welcome.
I think that's a tough one, but I might say Harvard Yale was kind of a special day. That's a lot of fun. We were in New Haven this year for that, so it's kind of a time for the whole school to come together, not just SOM, but the entirety of the Yale community. Go tailgate for a morning and afternoon, and then watch some football. So that was just a really nice day.
I would say it was a couple of birthday parties we had at our place where we got so many people, our neighbors, who simply just I think they hated us for a week after that, but they probably were jealous as well because it was quite fun, and just sharing all that love and caring with our friends was just fantastic. And those are, as Claire mentioned, some of my best friends as of this moment. So that would be it.
I don't think there's one day, but I will say what I miss most is like closing bell. I miss that on Thursdays, and just it was just the start of like a really good weekend, and just hanging out with friends, and like others, like in the I don't know where you all do it now, but it was in the middle of the lawn. And just having, for me, it was the green cup because I was in the green cohort, but I don't know, just little traditions like that kind of culminate to your experience there. And I miss those actually the most, and just being able to walk to hang out with people, just because it is such a small and close-knit like city and town. So that's what I miss the most.
I would add one story. It just came back to my mind. There is a former president of Mexico who works at Yale. His name is Ernesto Cedillo. And I literally sent him an email saying, "Hi, President Cedillo, my name is Carlos Mancera. I'm a student at Yale. I would love to meet you." And he replied like 2 hours later, inviting me to a conference he was hosting at some other school. I went there and I introduced myself to him, and he was the most welcoming person I would have ever imagined from a former president of my country. So I think that speaks a lot about the community as well.
Fantastic, thank you. And I don't want to set the expectations that you will meet your country's president anytime you come to Yale, but it's actually not a totally unheard of thing. That's a great example. I'm going to go. Those are some fun examples, and I'd love to get just one or two more questions, maybe a little more philosophical that came in, which was, how did Yale change you as a person? What is the difference you see in yourself before and after your MBA? So I'd love to get maybe a couple thoughts there, a little more pensive, a little more introspective than the last question.
I think it's two main reflections that happened through those 2 years and that continue to happen now are, one, there are just so many things you can do, and when you, being at Yale, you had so many options. You need to be very smart in what you choose to do and what not to do. So learning how to say no is one of the biggest learnings from being at Yale. And the second one is, I would say, being exposed to a much more diverse environment than what I was used to also helped me out a lot to consider other ways of understanding things or seeing things from so many perspectives. Is really something that I probably wouldn't have had in another place, certainly in Mexico, and probably in other MBA experiences.
Thank you so much. Any other thoughts on that? Doesn't have to be, but if anyone else has anything else to share.
Yeah, I will say that, especially working internationally, and Carlos would know this much better, but I think that having matriculated through the Yale experience and having the support of the network and the power of the brand behind you, it's very much credentializing. And, from an introspection perspective, I no longer bother with imposter syndrome, because it's, that's some of the lessons in humility that you learn going through this program. Like, you will always know I just believe in the power of teams, and, whether you learn that experience from your learning teams or whatever it may be, I think you just know that you may not have all the answers, but you've seen firsthand that by working with teams and other people and partnering with them, you will figure it out. And I think that is the biggest takeaway that I had. And it really made me a better leader and a better person and a better citizen, just because now I know to expect better and to do better. And so I think about that a lot in the day-to-day of my professional life and personal life.
That's great. Thank you so much, Claire. We're at 12:55, so I'd love to ask one last question, maybe see if I could maybe get a response from each of you. Carlos, you kind of touched on this a little bit. You had some very, I think, helpful advice just now, but the question is really what, as everyone on this session is thinking about getting an MBA likely in the near future, and what advice would you offer to someone who's applying to an MBA program right now?
Sure. What I mentioned was, be very conscious on what you want to get out of your MBA. That will help you choosing the best program for you and also making the best experience out of that program. Second, I would suggest that you talk to as many people as possible and try to get a diverse sample of people. Try to get people who are working in the career you're aiming to pivot into, or where you want to go to. I think talking to people who are at the clubs would be very helpful. Second, look into the classes that you want to take, because eventually you'll face a restriction on which classes you can take and which you cannot. So be very mindful on which ones you really want to take to meet your desires. And finally, I think you have to go to New Haven and see the campus. There is not one person I know who visited campus and was not pleasantly surprised on it. So if you do those three things, I think you'll have good information to make a good decision.
I'll add two things. One, I think tactically, but also philosophically, know your story. Obviously, the application requires an essay from you, and like that aside, I think just knowing your story and what led you to the place that you are today, what is making you seek that, and to Carlos's point, what are you hoping to get out of it? And just being as honest and authentic and clear to yourself first on what your story is will just help you so much as you go through the process. And I think everybody should do that exercise, whether or not you're applying for this program, but particularly important as you go through that process. And I think second, one of the questions was around what is the most underutilized resource? For me personally, it was just the faculty and just the incredible roster of the world's best, like brilliant academic minds are just like at your fingertips, and you can just knock on their doors and talk to them. And I recently was in India going through a media rights auction for a big property out there, and getting to learn from Fiona Scott Morgan on, the auction strategy and process, and literally being able to see that in practice in real life was just one of the coolest experiences academically I'd ever had. And the fact that I can just still be in touch with her and she would be able to just, she's a domain expert in that in the world is just amazing. So that's kind of the other aspect that I would encourage all of you to explore as you think about applying to this program.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, I've got a couple points to add if we've got time.
Sure.
I think like number one for me, I'm very much the type of person who like does 110% of the research they need to, especially going into something like this. But I would definitely say, take the forums with a grain of salt. There's a lot out there that's not necessarily true. People don't always fully know what's going on, but they're saying a lot of things. So, I think just kind of as Claire said, like staying true to your story, knowing who you are and what you're looking for is kind of key to staying centered throughout the process.
Great. Thank you. And I don't know, Hallie, do you have anything to bring it on home with? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I think the other three said it really well. I think just taking time to reflect before you start is really important, because once you get there, it's very much fast and furious. So just really know what you're hoping to get out of it, and then just stay true to yourself. Be open to new experiences, but also know your own limits and when to say no.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice, and I echo that. I can't remember at one point one of the faculty members told me that the sort of the key to success in business school, it's like a hot air balloon, like you rise by what you throw out. And so it's learning to say no and learning how to edit things, I think is a key skill. I want to thank you all. This has been a fantastic session. Carlos, Claire, Hallie, Alan, I really appreciate the time. And you're willing to go a little over and to compensate for my tardy arrival. So thank you so much. Those were great insights. And I hope everyone who's on the session enjoyed and got something out of it. We look forward to continuing to engage with you as you think about your your MBA journey generally, and possibly with SOM more specifically. So thank you all, and have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. Thank you so much. Have a great day.